Welcome to The Next Delicious Thing. This week, I am chatting to Safia Shakarchi about what it takes to be a food photographer. So if you're interested in potentially pursuing this as a career, or if you're just a bit nosy like I am, then we're going to ask her about what sort of person, like in terms of what kind of personality traits perhaps, or what kind of skills are really useful to be a food photographer, where you would go about getting started, how much you can earn. And also I'm going to ask her a little bit about what you might look for in a food photographer. So if you have a food business and you need food photography, then what kind of questions you might want to ask, and where you might find one. So welcome, Safia. Thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So I thought it would be good to just start with finding out a little bit more about you. So you are not just a food photographer. So for those of you who don't know, this year Safia launched another pantry, which is an incredible resource, I'm going to call it for now, because it's a website, but it is so much more, and will be too, I'm sure. So there was a pop-up in Coldrops Yard where she curated the most incredible set of food and food related products, which is kind of, as I understand it, the whole point of another pantry. It's a seasonal curation of beautiful and delicious things. Does that about summarize it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the pop-up was kind of supposed to be a big launch event to kind of launch the website, I suppose. But it had such a great reaction that I'm hoping to do more of that. But yeah, the website is kind of bringing together the UK food world. It is trying to be like an online destination for everyone who loves food, whether you want recipes or to kind of find out where to go, what to do, and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, hoping to kind of reinvent the recipe website in a way, the traditional recipe website, and build a community around it, host events, kind of just make cooking fun and a little bit more thoughtful, I think, than what many people look at it as. So recipes are released 4 times a year in a seasonal edit, and it's to encourage us all to cook with the seasons, but also to just slow down a bit. I think one of the reasons why I also wanted to launch another pantry and to build it was maybe it is because I'm a food photographer and I've also been in the styling world and the recipe development world, but I just know how much work goes into creating all of that food content. And I think I got to a point where I just felt like I was constantly being ambushed with food content, I guess, with social media, and I don't know, there's just so much around. So I felt like it was an attempt, by releasing them only 4 times a year, to slow things down and to get everyone to kind of appreciate each recipe and the person that's created that recipe.
You have just mentioned what I was going to bring up, that your background is not just food photography. So I imagine some people come to food photography by straight photography, and perhaps portrait or weddings or something. And your background is in recipe development and styling. Do you want to just talk to me a bit about what your first job was and where it went from there?
Yeah, sure. After I went to university, I actually went to culinary school. So I was initially in the kitchen. I did pastry at the Cordon Bleu. Then after that, I don't know, I guess I loved so many different aspects of food that I just wasn't sure which I wanted to do. So I did work in bakeries for a while. My first job was actually at the Meringue Girls Bakery, just off Broadway Market.
That's how you know them.
Yeah, it was honestly the best place to work. Alex and Stacey were such great, women, I guess, to have as role models. And they were always, I just remember there's one thing that they said, and it was always supporting other people in business and other women in business will never affect your own business. And that's just something I've always carried with me. I loved working there. And then after that, I kind of dotted around, did a couple of stages, did a short stage at Ottolenghi, and was in and out of kitchens, and kind of didn't want to be tied to a kitchen, I guess. So set up a series of supper clubs with a friend of mine, and we used to pop up all around London. That was really fun. And I kind of from there went into freelance work, recipe development, styling, a bit of photography here and there, and events and all kinds of stuff like that. I guess what I kind of hadn't realized was I'd kind of been cooking since I was about 16 anyway. And it was at the time when everyone was starting a food blog. So I started a food blog when I was 16. I would kind of bake and take photos of it, write the recipes up, do all the styling. And then I kind of had a moment a couple of years after I started working in the food industry professionally, where I was like, I think I've realized that actually my favorite part of that whole process was the photography. And I'd had a camera, I was given a camera when I was 16 for my birthday. And so yeah, that was when I started, and I'd kind of taught myself over the years as I kind of built connections and relationships with different restaurants and bakeries. They kind of gradually started asking me to take photos for them as well as style. I think the styling was really helpful because when you go into restaurants and bakeries and businesses on those kinds of shoots, it's really handy to have the styling eye, I guess, if you don't have a food stylist to hand. So I think that was where it was really helpful. And then, yeah, that's kind of how it ended up funneling in. It was actually COVID as well that ended up making it the majority of what I do. I think because I was able to do the photography from home and also have the styling experience and the recipe development experience, I could kind of do all those things at home.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, effectively, when you have the styling background as well, then they're getting 2 for 1, really. And then add in 3 for 1 when you can also create recipes if required, or at least cook them. If it's the food photography for a food magazine, then someone else has made the recipe perhaps. But if you're not able to get to the same place, you can make it and they know that it's going to be made well.
Yeah, exactly. It was handy to have all of those skills.
And the food styling, did you just learn that kind of on the job?
Yeah, I mean, food styling is kind of, I always describe it as being like a glamorous chef. It's just basically being a chef on a photo shoot, sometimes even harder. So if you have the experience of having trained or like gone to culinary school or worked in restaurants, then you've got that basis. You're cooking and making it look pretty. I mean, the meringue girls as well themselves, they were food stylists. So I ended up assisting them on a lot of shoots and picked up some stuff, and then also did some bits at food magazines. But yeah, all of this kind of thing. I mean, you can go and study it. You can go and train to become a chef and then end up in food styling, or you can go study photography and become a food photographer. But you can also learn them on the job and as you're doing them, which is what I did, apart from the food training.
If you wanted to learn on the job, what would be the best way for somebody who has kind of currently no connections to the food world, do you think, to start doing that?
Food styling or food photography?
Either, really. I guess in this episode, we're kind of focusing mainly on food photography, but perhaps it's useful, even if they want to do food photography, for them to request to assist even as a food stylist.
For sure. I mean, I guess the same thing applies to both, but just a really good thing to do, yeah, is assist. And also the power of just like reaching out to people. If there are people that you really admire, like their work, people whose work that you love, or that you know well, or that you just love to work with, just send them a message or an email and see if there is an opportunity for you to assist them. Because then that not only gets you possibly into, get a foot in the door, but then you start building the connections with people and relationships. And I think in the food world, that's the most important thing, honestly. And it's the best thing about the food world is the relationships and the community that you can build.
And perhaps there might be an opportunity to look for even a minimum wage jobs, but it was in an organization where you knew that you might be able to do some of that. So you're at least getting some compensation, maybe not minimum wage, but something rather than completely voluntary, which would kind of put it out of reach for a lot of people. When you were working at Meringue Girls, you were paid, presumably.
Yeah, I was paid.
Yeah. You were there as like to cook.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was there as a baker, but then because there were those opportunities to assist them on food styling jobs, I was also able to do that. Can't remember if I was paid for those days. I probably was. But yeah, I mean, I did do my fair share of unpaid work at the beginning, tried to balance it out with paid bits. So if there was something that I desperately, really, really wanted to help with, but I would also try and make sure that I was still getting other bits. And like, you can always try and take work that maybe doesn't, I know it's not the best thing, but that isn't exactly what you want to do. Like you said, like start in a company or start doing something slightly related so that then you can kind of swerve. And
I feel like there are, especially at the moment, there are always jobs in restaurants. And if you chose a restaurant where the food was plated beautifully, then you'd at least have the option, even just as you're walking past, to see how the chefs are like making sure, there's odd numbers of decorations and like where they put things. And if you just start being observant in that sense, and like you say, practicing, if you can't afford to do unpaid work, but practicing at home. So you might work in something completely different, but like you with your food blog, you could spend your evenings and weekends. And I'm sure there's plenty of YouTube tutorials on tips and how in styling and photography.
Yeah, genuinely. I mean, if you love it enough, you'll spend hours on YouTube and teaching yourself and just like reading and doing all that kind of stuff. There are always assisting jobs and people that do want help. And especially if you're eager and really excited by it, then even if you do manage to get one assisting job like a month or something at a weekend, like you will gradually build up to it.
And what would an assistant be paid? Presumably, like, I mean, obviously some would voluntary, but I'm pretty sure most people pay their assistants. So do you know what they'd be paid currently?
Yeah, I mean, it varies. I've been paid like maybe £50 for a day, and 100 in the past. And the top end of assisting, I think, is like 200, which is actually quite good. You can get decent pay off it, but I'd say about 100-ish is probably standard, 100 to 150.
And what would a photographer's assistant do?
Help with everything. You actually learn a lot. So it depends what kind of assisting you're doing. If you're doing something editorial, for example, like on a food magazine shoot, you'll probably be the one that's like carrying the reflector or like changing, like helping with the lighting, or like just checking. One thing that I always used to do, and what an assistant is super, super helpful for, is going through every photo that the photographer takes as they take them, checking the focus, making sure everything's looks good, and then even actually like selecting them and saying which one out of the ones that has been taken is the best one or should be carried forward. That's just something super helpful, because if, you know, when you don't have an assistant, you end up with like 1,000 photos that you have to cull and go through and be like, oh God, which ones are the good ones? That's probably the main stuff, just being a helping hand.
And do you think it's possible for anyone to develop an eye by doing enough assisting?
Yeah, for sure. I think also, depending on who you assist, you end up kind of adopting techniques and traits from that photographer. I can see like where someone's assisted someone for a really long time, and I feel like their style is, they've adopted kind of elements of their style, which is quite nice. As with anything, like, you get better with practice, right? I think photographers do generally have a good eye, but I don't think that's necessarily something that you have to be like, you know, born with. I think you can practice and get better at it and learn to see what looks better and what angles you can approach things from, how the lighting comes in. Is it better from the side, from the back, from, you know, it's all stuff that you kind of get better at understanding.
I guess then my question would be, what is the potential earning? So for somebody perhaps is thinking about changing careers and might, you know, have financial responsibilities. So what if they, you know, put in their time in the weekends and evenings, what would the earning potential be? So kind of like, I guess I'm curious about kind of entry level photographers average, and then, you know, your kind of David Loftuses of the world, and Jean Cazel's, like the people who are really at the top of their game.
Yeah,
I don't know if you know, I'm just
I do. I feel like I do. It's a bit bonkers. So I guess it really depends on budgets. I mean, I know some really big publications that only pay like £250, £300 a day, which isn't a lot, because you also have to consider different photographers do it differently. You need to consider whether your day rate is going to include the time for post-production, for editing, or whether you're going to charge separate days, be like, okay, well, I'm going to be here for a day for the shoot, but I also need to charge a day for the editing afterwards. So it totally depends. Yeah, I guess it can start from, I mean, when I first started, I remember doing my first shoots for like £100, because I was like, I just want to do it and I have no idea. And also it is really important to chat to other photographers and other people in the industry. I think we're so like, none of us like talking about money, so it's actually quite good to have this conversation. And then also, depending on whether you want to do a half day or a full day, I do still do half days, and a lot of photographers don't, because actually when you do a half day, you're pretty much putting in the same amount of effort as a full day. Like a half day, I would say, is 4 hours, and a full day is 8 hours. But if you're making the journey, you're going there and you're taking all your equipment and you're setting up, really your half day rate should be about 75% of your full day rate.
totally agree. It's also the opportunity cost as well, because you'll potentially then get an offer for a full day that you can't accept.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, I guess a half day for like a mid-range photographer maybe would go from like 350 to 550, maybe, probably more, higher than that, 600. And then a full day, I'd say like a good, mid-range photographer, probably 850 upwards, 800, 850, 900. But I know that businesses, you know, people will charge way more than that for businesses that can afford more. It just depends on budget. Or editorial actually is sometimes less. So a book shoot might be 700 for a full day.
But because you're getting a multiple set of days in one go, like might be over a month or so.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a bulk discount.
Yeah, exactly. Because on a book shoot, you might be doing that for 3 weeks. So that's a strong chunk.
So I guess some photographers who might charge £900 a day might accept less, even 300, if it was for a big editorial like New York Times or something, just because then you get to say that you've been in the New York Times.
For sure. And like sometimes that is how, unfortunately, it does work with bigger publications. They have lower budget, but because they're huge, you're willing to do it for less because of the exposure.
Yeah. Although like if it's something like where they actually have kudos and credit and it is going to genuinely make a difference to what you can charge people in future, I do understand this, that they can kind of get away with that.
And it also depends. Like I try and be really flexible just because I really love working with like small businesses and restaurants, and I know that they're often strapped for budget, you know. So we always chat to people and be like, what can you do, and like try and make it work if it's something that you really want to do and something that you really care about, but also you have to make a living. So
I think that's really nice way to kind of run a business. And I know lots of people, you know, they're lawyers that do that will charge their full rate to, you know, big businesses and then be able to do free work or low paid, you know, at cost or a bit higher for people who otherwise couldn't, because we kind of live in quite a skewed world of where the money flows. So
yeah, of course. And I guess another thing to mention as well is like travel and timings and like just actually taking things into account in your day. So for example, if I'm doing a shoot outside of London, I'll charge for that extra time, I guess, that I'm traveling for, or that, and try and get, you know, travel covered and all that kind of stuff. I guess if you're doing big shoot and, you know, you have an assistant and stuff, you also have to factor that into your pay. It's usually the photographer that will pay the assistant rather than the brand. I mean, it works differently for different shoots.
So that kind of $850 amount would pay for an assistant as well. Would that also cover the editing time, would you say?
I'd
in that case
add an assistant onto that if I could, if budget allows.
and would that include editing as well?
It depends. I try to put all my rate into one, and then I basically charge like overtime and say, look, basic round of edits is included, but if you then send it back to me and you're saying that you need this and this changed and you want X number of photos more, then I'll charge more for that. Some people actually charge, like they'll say my rate is 900 for the day and I'll only give you 30 photos, and they limit it.
Interesting.
I don't do that. Which I don't know if that's smart or not, but yeah, some people limit it if it's editorial, especially because with editorial you're setting up on a tripod or like on a stand, and the food stylist is involved, everyone's involved in getting the perfect shot, and then you then spend hours editing that one shot and getting all the coloring right and all that kind of stuff. But if you're doing a shoot that's a bit more free flowing and you're in a restaurant or it's not so set up, then you don't necessarily have to limit the amount of photos that you send the client.
That makes sense. So would you say that then as a photographer, people tend to focus on one style? So some might do more of like action shots, I guess, in restaurants and sort of things which is not a studio setup. And then others would do more like flat lay studio where you've got a team preparing everything.
I guess it depends. I think like we were saying, the higher end photographers, they'll probably be the ones that focus more on they're in their studio or they're in a studio, and I'll focus more on editorial and commercial type stuff from my experience anyway, and the people that I know. But generally, like I, for example, love doing both, and hopefully will always be able to do both. Like I love the editorial stuff because it's a lot more structured and you can really, really get the perfect shot. But then I love the stuff where I'm actually on location and shooting something in a restaurant and something that's happening. I actually feel that's a bit more creative as well. I feel like you're a bit more like just free to see what looks good and go for it. I guess it depends on the photographer and what they like.
Good to know there's options for people, because it's a bit like with portrait photography, you can do it in studio setting or you can do it out and about.
I guess, the editorial, the stuff in studios and the editorial stuff, like you said, you'll probably get more than one day. So pay wise, that's probably the stuff that you want. That's the stuff that you do want more of. Whereas if you're doing a one-off, then that would just be that one day. So yeah,
that's interesting. So we didn't get to what the kind of high end is then.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard like that really high end photographers can charge like crazy amounts, like £6,000 to £10,000 a day, which is just bonkers. But
awesome.
Yeah, I know, exactly. It's something to work towards. Yeah, so that's what I've heard anyway. that they can get. So it's a pretty solid career option.
Yeah, definitely. If you've got like, if people are telling you you've got talent and you love it, then definitely. I'm thinking those kind of people who are earning that amount of money generally have been doing it for at least 10 years. And that's the experience really compounds. And I suspect that people would be willing to pay that kind of money if they know that, I guess you were talking about studio shots where you can get a perfect shot. But if you are out on location, for example, like you really want somebody who's definitely going to get some shots you can use, because you don't want to skimp on spending £600 a day for somebody. And then you're like, oh, we've paid for all of the flights and everything and we can't use anything. So
exactly. Yeah, no, for sure. And they'll also have mega equipment. Like a lot of the time I hire in equipment, which is actually an interesting thing to talk about.
Oh yes, I'd love to know, because it's not a cheap thing to get started in. I mean, maybe to get started, but like to get people to pay you money, you really need a proper DSLR, I guess.
Yeah. Well, actually, so I actually only upgraded my camera like last year. I was using a pretty average camera for a long time. I went to a talk, I think it was, I can't remember, years ago, but someone said to me that it doesn't matter whether you have a really fancy camera or not. If you're a good photographer, you'll still take a good photo. So I was determined to just keep using my really average camera for as long as possible, whilst just getting better at being a photographer, I guess. Initially, actually, I don't think it matters what camera you use. Another thing is, if you do get a DSLR, the better thing to spend your money on is lenses. So you can get any kind of body, I say any, but a cheaper body, and then you can kind of go all out on what people call glass, which is the lenses.
Didn't know that. Cool term. Lingo, the glass. How many lenses would a food photographer need to get started on kind of, I mean, obviously you can get started with one, but like really, like, would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is one lens that every budding food photographer should have. It's a 50mm lens. There are two 50mm lenses. It's called a pancake. I think a lot of people call it a pancake lens, which is like, it's much smaller. I don't actually have my 50mm. But that's like, you can get that for about 150, 200 pounds. And it's the best lens. Like a food photographer's lens is the 50mm. So whether you have the cheaper one is basically the perfect place to start. And then obviously when you get a bit more advanced, you can then invest in the more expensive one, which can be crazy expensive. But that one, when I first did it like 10 years ago, I bought it off Amazon and used it every day. And that it's great for food. It's not so great for like portrait and interiors and all that kind of stuff. So if you did want to have two, one for food and for more like, you know, closer in shots, it would be the 50mm. And then a really, really good one, the one that I always use for interiors and portraits, is 35mm. So those two lenses are pretty much what you need. And they're prime lenses, so they don't zoom or anything. But a lot of like amazing photographers I know actually use zoom lenses, where you can get the range of both, I guess.
Isn't it a compromise when you have a zoom lens and quality? I guess if you're spending enough on it, perhaps not.
Yeah, if you get a good enough zoom lens, it actually doesn't. And like, again, if you know how to use it, then not really.
I guess you save a lot of time then, not having to switch out lenses.
Yeah,
I mean, it's not that big a deal, but it can be annoying if it's an action like live shot, then it is frustrating. I think if you've got a studio shot, perhaps not as important. But
that's the thing. Like when I am actually shooting on location, sometimes I'm like scrambling to quickly change my lens, and I'm like, oh, because I way prefer using prime lenses over zoom, just because I don't know whether it is a good analogy, but it's kind of like driving a manual versus an automatic. Like if you really love photography and you kind of love running up to things or like going further away and like kind of doing that manually, then prime lenses are really fun. Zoom lenses are really good for travel as well, because again, if you're in that situation where you can't carry three lenses.
Do higher end photographers typically come with more than one camera?
Yes.
So that then they can switch out like prime lenses without having to actually switch the lens, or is it for another reason?
I guess a super high-end photographer might have two of the same camera, so yeah, they could do that. Or, you know, if you're doing, I guess this is more for video, but you might have different tripods set up or different stands set up with different cameras to get different angles.
Yeah.
But usually, like, what you would have your camera, and then you'd have the second one as your spare if your first one decided to die in the middle of a shoot. So I'd take my old camera,
yes,
as my second.
Okay, that makes sense.
So yeah.
So let's just recap. Just to start, to be an assistant, you need just any kind of camera, but to kind of actually begin a career in it, ideally you'd have a 50mm lens and a 35mm lens. And then I guess you also need a tripod. Do you need any of the reflectors or things like that?
You don't need any of it, I guess, but as you get a bit more advanced and as you start doing more and more shoots, they're useful to have. Tripods, yeah, super, super, super handy in every situation, really. You can totally get away with freestyling it and not doing it. And again, like some action shots are better without that, because then you can kind of get in on the action and get the exact angle. I used to actually never use a tripod because I found it so limiting. I found it like just didn't give me the opportunity to go and get the angle that I wanted. But actually they're amazing, especially if you're shooting in situations like low lighting, where you really need the stability. A tripod is like your best friend. If you're doing product shots where you want everything to be the same scale and really consistent, tripod. Overhead shots, if you're again setting up editorial and commercial, you will need a stand or you will need a tripod, definitely. And then diffusers and reflectors and stuff are just super handy. Again, you can get them quite cheaply on Amazon, and actually what they're really helpful for is just experimenting and figuring out what they do and how you can change the light and how you can increase the shadows, and how if you've got a really, really sunny day and you don't want the sunlight, even though sunlight in photos is great, then you can trick it into just diffuse the light basically and get a completely different look. They're useful to learn and to be able to do many things depending on what your client wants and what you want.
Would you, if you're going to buy a tripod, then I guess it's worth buying one that has the arm that can go horizontal as well?
Yeah, it's handy. My tripod, the one I started out with, is a Manfrotto, which is great. It's super sturdy. It lasts me ages. And it's they have a range of different kind of tripods that you can get at different prices. But then when you want to start getting like much sturdier, much bigger, much higher, they can get super expensive and probably start at like 500.
Yeah.
Photography is not cheap, which is, I guess, also why your rate has to make sure that you're covering the equipment that you're buying, the software that you're using.
Yeah. I was just thinking that because when you're talking cameras and lenses that go into the thousands of pounds, and when you're looking for multiples to make sure you've got spares, then you really need to be paid $6,000 a day. Like as you work up, you get more and more equipment.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you start buying lights and when you start buying, I don't know, like everything, all the props and God knows what that you need. Yeah, for sure. It kind of goes hand in hand.
Yeah. And I mean, those people are not necessarily working every day of the week either. So
you kind of can't when you can, it depends, but like, because you have to account for the editing time, you need to always factor that into your diary.
Yeah. And just the time coordinating back and forth, figuring out dates, like pitching your work and then sending invoices, all of those things. You either have to be allowing time to do that yourself or have some kind of virtual assistant or actual assistant that can do that for you, which they still require managing even if you're outsourcing it. So many of these kind of freelance jobs, there is a lot more that goes into the time you're charging for than physically being present with the people who are paying you.
Well, yeah, also it's a business. You're running a business, even though, I'm a sole trader, it is a business. So you need to consider the fact that you're also paying your insurance every year. You're also paying all of those things that a business would pay, but you're just
accountant and
so you need to factor all of those costs in.
So on those costs, you mentioned the software. Are there particular software options that you see lots of photographers in food use, or are there options?
Yeah, there are options. So I use Capture One, which I actually only switched to 2 years ago. It was in lockdown where I was really, really reluctant to switch. I started off using Lightroom. I'm one of those people that when I'm attached to something and I know how it works, I refuse to learn something else. I'm like, no, I'm so used to this, I want to use it. But then obviously in lockdown, I had all this time. So I decided to work out Capture One, and I don't think I could ever go back to Lightroom. The only thing is Lightroom, I think, although Adobe's changed their pricing, so it's become a lot more expensive, but I'm pretty sure Lightroom is still more affordable than Capture One. I think it's £25 a month for Capture One. But it's amazing. I mean, I think I would suggest starting with Lightroom, and also because normally Lightroom comes with Photoshop as well, which is I still use even with Capture One. They're very similar. It just kind of depends which one feels better for you. I think initially the reason that I also wanted to change was because my camera wasn't compatible. I couldn't tether I don't think Lightroom can tether. Tethering is basically when you link up your camera to your computer or your laptop and shoot live.
Yeah.
So every image comes onto your screen. For some reason, yeah, I think it didn't work for me on Lightroom. I think it does, but it just didn't work for me. Capture One allowed me to do that. And also you just get so much more control over color. You can kind of select individual colors and edit them, and I love it.
That's good. That's really interesting. And I think the tethering part, although as you say, if it works with Lightroom, that's great, but is something that in the short photography course, it wasn't a food photography course, but I wanted to learn how to use a camera that I'd spent money on. And one of the biggest things that I don't do enough when I take photographs just for Instagram and the blog is check the photo on the screen compared to what it is looking through the lens. I mean, even if you're looking at it on the tiny lens that's on the camera rather than, through the eyepiece. I don't know the lingo, but the difference between when you actually see it after it's been taken and then you're like, oh, it's just in the slight wrong position. So I see that a lot when I've gone to photo shoots where someone, like you say, the photographer's assistant is sitting at the computer and the photographer will come back and forth and check the shot as well.
Yeah, because also, I mean, a lot of cameras, like my camera, you can zoom in on the screen, but you won't be able to check the focus or the composition to the same level as if you're seeing it bigger. And also you can apply a filter, an automatic, like if you have a filter that you always use, or you just know the adjustments that you make to a photo when you're editing it, you can kind of do that as you go, so you can see what the final photo, or get a better idea of what the final photo is going to look like.
Oh, that's interesting. Is that like a preset?
Yeah, you can either do it as a preset or you can just do it as you go. But okay. Yeah.
So just to, if anyone's not, these are kind of words that are newish to me as well. So it would just be if you happen to know that you typically want to make something brighter, or you're going for, like, maybe you take your photographs and you edit them always into black and white, it would automatically do that. So you get an idea of seeing it. So there's lots of different things you can do to photographs to make them, sharper or brighter if you're trying to tell a story through the editing. And is editing one of the harder bits of becoming a photographer, or?
Oh, I'm one of those people, like, I really have to edit like as soon as I've done the shoot, because I'm super excited to see the photos. And if you don't, you can kind of let it drag on, and then you've done your next shoot and you kind of like, I don't know, I like to do it straight away, because there are times where I've gone back to it 2 weeks later and I'm like, oh God, like, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know. I actually really love editing, to be honest. It's funny, a lot of photographers will say, just try and as much as possible to get the photo right in the camera. There are, I guess, different things, like, for example, focus is something that you're never going to be able to edit into a photo. So it's really, really important to prioritize that and make sure that you're getting the quality that you want. Whereas if your exposure is a bit off, or if there's a certain area where, I don't know, a color hasn't come out correctly, that's stuff that you can work on. And that's what's great about photography, and that's what's great about editing. So again, like, when you're starting out, it's quite a fascinating process. You just learn about what you can manipulate and change. And as much as I love editing, I try not to over edit, because I just prefer them to look a little bit more natural. But different photographers have different styles, and it's just a nice thing to go through to work out your style, I guess, when you're starting out.
So if somebody like already feels like they'd love photography, is there any kind of personality traits or skills that you think in people are particularly well suited to it? And is there anything that you would watch out for? Like, so is there something that you perhaps didn't realize about photography that you think people should know before they kind of pursue it as a career?
Oh, like editorial shoots and commercial shoots, like much bigger shoots, are actually way less, I don't know if glamorous is the right word, but there's a lot of like heavy lifting and lugging your equipment around, and like it can get very technical. And I think, I don't know whether this is controversial saying, but like sometimes on the bigger shoots you feel a little bit more distant from your camera, because everything's just so set up and you're kind of clicking a button. So I guess there's that.
I just was curious, when you said technical, do you mean in terms of analyzing all of the settings on your camera, and then you really need to know that? Or...
There's that, but then also, like, all the equipment that you're working with is like quite mega, and like you kind of have to know what everything does and how to manipulate it all. And there's just a lot of working with like technology, I think, when you get to like much bigger shoots.
Does that include you mean like lighting and like flashes and diffusers and all of that?
Yeah, exactly. Like all of those kinds of things. So I think there's that. And I think that's also why like photographers, like big photographers will often have like a team of people to help. Like they'll have more than one assistant to help bring stuff in. But in terms of personality traits, I feel like I know like every different kind of personality in a photographer. Like I know so many. I don't know. I think the one thing that I've gotten better at or had to get better at is you actually do have to go in and be quite confident. I mean, I know obviously that's something that comes with the fact that you're confident with your camera, but I mean more in the sense of, you know, if you're going into a restaurant and you're being paid to shoot and you're being paid to get good shots, you need to be able to go in there and be like, I need to move that chair and I need to move this and this is going to look better here. And obviously respecting the fact that you're in a restaurant and sometimes they'll be in service, so you really don't want to be a burden and be in everyone's hair. So you kind of have to be quite like, you have to be very patient because a lot of the time you will have to wait to get the shot and to be able to get to where you need to be. You also, oh God, the amount of times I've had to ask restaurants and bakeries and stuff to turn their lights off and they're like basically functioning in the dark and I just feel awful. But you just have to remember, like, this is my job. I'm here to do this. I'm getting paid to do this. I need to just do it.
And for anyone who doesn't realize that, the reason to turn the lights off is because often they're either like really blue or really yellow, right? So it will just or gives reflections or
exactly. You also have way more like power in editing and stuff when you've turned the lights off and like the color, the white balance. And usually it's just because they're yellow, especially in restaurants and stuff, which just completely changes the tone of the photo. And it's hard to get rid of.
It's it says somebody takes photos in restaurants when I go to eat, but it's problematic. And I see that a lot with even just the bigger food influencers will also ask for the lights to be turned off, or they'll, you know, I've definitely taken my plate outside for a restaurant if I'm like, I think I'm going to want to post this online, so I'm going to take it outside and put it on the ground and sorry.
It is a game changer. Like if anyone's just looking for a very basic tip, even if you're taking photos of stuff in your house, like of food in your house, turn the lights off, get close to a window. Also, that is for a budding photographer the easiest way to just get your just work with like natural daylight is the best thing ever.
That's I was going to ask you if you had a tip, so that is perfect. Thank you. And if somebody's looking for a food photographer, are there any particular questions that they should ask or how they should find them? Like, do you have any suggestions for people who might have a food business that they want to get some great photographs for, and they're perhaps, you know?
A lot of PR agencies will have like their list of photographers. So if you're a restaurant that's working with a PR agency, then that's, I don't know, they might have a recommendation or want you to work with a specific person. Also, if you've just seen someone whose work that you like, or if someone reaches out who is a photographer and is just like, I love your restaurant, I would love to shoot for you one day. I think that's the best way of doing it, because you know that they love what you do and it will come across. And then agencies, like a lot of photographers have an agent, and if you approach an agency, they'll hook you up with one that fits what you need.
Great tips as well for somebody who is a budding photographer. So speak to the PR agencies, reach out to businesses that you like, and reach out to agencies. I'm guessing agencies might be a little bit further down the line, but you said you approached restaurants and bakeries and that you liked and offered. I mean, some of them sounds like they came to you as well, but
I was quite lucky initially in that because I had worked in that industry. I knew people, and I was like, oh, I'm doing this. Can I come take photos? Or the other way around, they were like, would you be willing to take photos? There's lots of different ways. And again, obviously, if you're assisting other photographers, they might pass on work.
It feels to me like that assisting thing is really valuable, and choosing to be an assistant for somebody who is happy to mentor you and give advice as well. I mean, it's great, just even if they don't and you can just observe, I'm sure you get a lot out of it. But if you're going to be doing more of it and you're kind of, you know, giving up your time for free or for a low wage, you want to make sure that that person's a little bit vested in making sure that you can develop as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I would say I probably didn't do as much assisting as I would have wanted to do. So I think also, like, if you're someone that's starting out and you have a friend who is starting a food business, or I don't know, you know, someone in an industry where you can offer your services, you can just start shooting right away. Like, obviously, when you get to a point where you know you're going to be able to deliver, You can do both, unless you are, some assistants are literally employed full time by a photographer for a long time. But if you've got the freedom, then try doing stuff at all different kinds of things to develop, I guess.
That's a really good point. If you love the industry, then you can make a career out of being a photographer's assistant as well. It's not always a step to becoming a photographer, which I think is a thing worth pointing out. Is there anything that you haven't shared yet about how to become a food photographer, how to choose a food photographer, or perhaps even just how to take better photographs if you're not yet at a stage where you can afford a food photographer, that you haven't already shared? I feel like you've shared a lot, but if there's anything else that we haven't covered that you want to make sure we do before the end of the episode, that would be awesome.
Oh, I don't know. I guess I would say, like, go, if you're a client looking for a photographer, and also even if you're a photographer who's, you know, chatting to a prospective client, make sure that they're also coming to you or like understand your style. Different photographers have different styles, and I have sometimes been in a situation where a client's expected a completely different style to what I normally do and what's in my portfolio, which is obviously, you know, you have to work with whoever you're working with. It's better when you have a little bit more creative license and they trust you and they know that this is your style and this is what they're looking for, and you can kind of like come together rather than anyone forcing themselves into doing something that doesn't feel natural to them. I think that's also something to bear in mind.
That's a really good point. And I think it alludes to the importance of communication as well. So like you said, that the photographers that are clear up front that I'm only going to give you 30 images, even if you're not going to be that restrictive, you might want to give them an idea of what they might expect. Because if they're expecting to get like 1,000 images that will get them through the whole of like the year and for all of their socials and things like that. So that's worth.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Like what I actually think is amazing and great about photography is that every photographer is different. There is room for everyone in a way, because everyone's got a different style, and there will be a client who you like resonate with over someone else who might then go to a different client because they're suited more to them. So yeah.
So how can people find out more about you and your work? Where should they go?
Oh, I am terrible at Instagram these days, but I have an Instagram, which is Dear Safia. My portfolio is on my website, which is dearsafia.com. And then, yeah, there's all the Another Pantry bits as well that I'm working on.
Dearsafia.com and anotherpantry.co.uk. I will link to both of those under this video. And if you're listening on audio, it'll be at thenextdeliciousthing.com. This has been so interesting. I have loved finding out about like what exactly is involved in everything. I didn't really find out much about a typical day, which I was going to ask.
You might have to start super early, depending. Also, if you're only working with natural light in the winter, you need to start early because your light's going to disappear at 3, which is a disaster. That's usually when you're just starting out and you have no lighting, or you don't hire in lighting or anything. Your day might start very early if you need to get there set up and do all that kind of stuff. You'll have the morning part of the shoot, you'll probably break for lunch, then you'll do the second half of the shoot. Also have to bear in mind that you're going to have to pack everything down, take it all home. But yeah, I mean, it's always different. That's what's great. Every day is different. There's no...
you could be working totally on your own, or you could be working with a giant team.
Yeah, exactly. You could start super, super early, or you could have a late one, an afternoon shoot.
Also, if you don't mind, share the links to the photography rental that you might use as well. I thought then if people are interested in kind of running it as a business, then they can have a look online and see what the kind of costs for things to rent might be.
Yeah, it's also a really, really great way to figure out what camera you want. I spent over a year deciding which camera to buy, and I rented loads to try them all out rather than going and spending thousands of pounds on one that I wasn't sure about.
So, which did you buy in the end?
I went a bit mad and I bought the Canon R5, which if anyone is considering buying it is amazing, but actually I think I probably could have gotten away with getting the Canon R, which is kind of like one step down and significantly cheaper, and then just spending more on lenses. So
yeah, good to know. I'm sure if you're planning it for a long-term career, it's still, it's not money that will be wasted in any way. Amazing. Thank you. I always do this. I end it and then I ask another question.
I'm the same. It's like when you say bye at the front door and then you end up standing there for half an hour and chatting about something completely different.
Yes. That is the story of my life. Hopefully that's an enjoyable thing as part of this podcast and video. And well, I really appreciate your time. It's been really interesting and always lovely to talk to you anyway. Thanks everybody for listening, and all the links, dearsafia.com, anotherpantry.co.uk. thenextdeliciousthing.com. Please subscribe and tell your friends. Thanks. Bye.